Hello, Morgan. Happy Friday, buddy.
What is that sweater, my man? What is that sweater?
It's my ugly Christmas sweater.
Well, I'm decorated somewhat like a tree, at least for the moment. I have my little ornaments on my ears. They're very difficult to stick around. Are you an elf, or are you Santa?
Saint
Oh,
Nicholas.
you got the whole beard. I'm sorry.
I missed my
didn't mean
hat.
to-
Okay.
Got it.
Next year I'll get the beard.
It's the green that really sells the fact you could be wearing an elf hat with it.
I'll take that into consideration.
Okay, sounds good. Well, hi everyone. Welcome. If you're here, drop a hello in chat. I know our future audio listeners on the podcast will be like, what are these guys talking about? And you know what? Don't worry about it. It's the holiday season and we were just having a little bit of fun. Today, we are going to talk about a hot topic, I think. You've done some polls on this week, Nick, and it's something that I hear gets thrown around a bunch about, okay, I'm using LinkedIn. How do I know it's effective in driving sales? I think it's such a good question. So where do you want to start today, Nick? As I remove these delicately arranged ornaments, they're very difficult to stay on my ears. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us, Ashwin. I would just like to know, good morning, Kinder, who tried out the cold prospecting last week? Who put LinkedIn to work for them? Throw it in the comments.
I did.
Good morning for us. Good morning, Christina. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Yeah, just throw it in the comments. Who jumped in on LinkedIn? Because if you did, then it's going to go and help with our conversation today, because it'll be able to see, did it work or did it not? Or at least get started. And so, is LinkedIn a useful tool for salespeople?
Oh, Christina did. For us, did.
Perfect. A lot of people feel like it's really hard to prove social media as a useful tool. And yeah, it can be this, dark funnel, as it's been called, or the dark social, because it's this gray area that a lot of people really struggle with. But even when I did my poll this week, I realized that it's a really misunderstood thing. And so my poll, I said, is what is the only LinkedIn stat for effectiveness? Trying to keep it really simple. And all I said was profile views, engagement, meetings booked, and then, of course, show me the answer, which also told me a lot. But profile views only got 3%, engagement got 29%, meetings booked got 43%, show me the answer got 24%. That means that a quarter of you were curious but weren't sure, which means this is a hot topic. And it was interesting, too, because salespeople mostly said meetings booked, or messaged me, said deals closed. And marketers said, it depends.
Of course, the marketers say it depends. There's no better way to get out of that. Jeffrey commented on my stream. Thank you. I appreciate the feedback. I may bring back the danglers for the future.
And your trees are those will be there to stay, though, right?
Yeah. The trees are not gonna go anywhere. Thank you. I honestly, what those poll results also showed me is that some people maybe have overcorrected, thinking about how to measure effectiveness on LinkedIn. That meetings booked was at 40 some odd %, right? Was our highest
43
result. So just to sort of kick this off, I think that's a great metric to measure, and I think it's very important to measure. But it's not the only thing to measure. There's so much more that goes into building a presence and building trust on LinkedIn than just meetings booked. And in fact, if you get stuck in gear and you're not able to appreciate the other sorts of metrics that might be less directly related to the meetings, but as important, you may begin to overemphasize the sorts of activities that get you to revenue. Mostly because if you're only focused on meetings booked, you may overcorrect and start trying to leverage every relationship that you're connecting with to get a meeting, for example, when in
Hmm.
reality, that may not be the best path. That may not be the best option.
Yeah, you have to weigh it out at different levels. So profile views can be a really valuable metric if you know what you're tracking. Profile views, I find that when I hit about, I'm getting closer to 1,000 now, or in a rolling 90, that there's enough information for me to look. Who is seeking me out?
Mm-hmm.
What are they asking me? And so I can pull these bits of information and tell a story that is relevant. And now I'm noticing, as I'm changing my content and I'm changing my outreach and I'm building this community and surrounding myself with the right people, now I'm getting better insights into what's actually working. And it took a long time for that to happen. And I would say until you're getting at least 500, if not 1,000 views, it's hard to go and pull enough information because there's not enough data. But as soon as you start seeing your ICP, those target accounts, those key personas that are in those buying decisions, you know that your LinkedIn is starting to work in a way that is meaningful. When it comes down to engagement, this one's a little bit harder because a lot of people will use the Shield app and they'll go and look at, which is an app for LinkedIn for analytics, and it is a great product. But what they look at is they say, well, the industry average is, 1%. So if I'm beating industry average, I'm good. But the reality is, if you're social selling, the key is, are you building a community, a tribe of people that are following you, and is your ICP and your key personas diving in? If not, that engagement doesn't matter nearly as much because yes, you're engaging, but it's to the wrong people, which means that messaging isn't aligning. And so you actually have to break this down, or it is a vanity metric. And that is one of the key things. And if I could have taken out meetings booked, I did it on purpose because I knew that it was a hot button that a lot of salespeople like to see is meetings booked. I would have actually changed it to pipeline or revenue,
Mm-hmm.
because LinkedIn is a really powerful tool to get demand, create demand. It actually isn't the best tool to capture demand. And so you can't look at it like this is standalone, like one piece. You actually have to build it out and have the steps so that it works out properly. And this is why having the right data points to prove a business case for LinkedIn is so critical. Actually, it doesn't matter if you're on Twitter, YouTube, any of it. You have to make a business case, but that business case has to be based on the right numbers that tells a story that means something to the person you're telling it to.
Mm-hmm. 100%. I was surprised. Um, revenue is the key metric. It's why we're doing this. As long as you're leveraging LinkedIn for social selling or some sort of prospecting tool, like meetings booked is great and important, but really you want to be driving pipeline. You want to be having deals potentially from the relationships that you're building and that you have built out on LinkedIn using the prospecting strategy we talked about last time, and using the content and comment strategy we talked about before then. And revenue can be tricky, but like at the end of the day, if your CRM isn't set up to, like, I don't know, track LinkedIn, add a custom note, add a custom little field, something like that. Get somebody to, if you can't yourself do it, have the tech do it. Like, there's ways to be able to track who's coming into your pipeline and how effective your efforts are. And it doesn't stop at meetings booked. It should really be about pipeline and especially about bottom line revenue. But that's also a lagging metric. So for the uninitiated, there's two. I always learned there's the difference between leading and lagging metrics. I think this is a Covey principle, like Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and I learned this a number of years ago. And in marketing, there are leading metrics and lagging metrics. And so a lagging metric is, did we do it right? How do we know we did it right? And a leading metric is, do we think we are doing it right? It's more predictive. So, for example, profile views could actually be a leading metric, because if you get more and more views from your ICPs and the personas within your ICP, the right titles at the right companies who are viewing your profile, that is predictive that an increased percentage of those personas may reach out to you, may connect with you, may start a conversation with you, may book a meeting with you. And so it's predictive. It's saying, profile views are not the end all be all. That's not how we're measuring our success on the back end. But because we're only measuring our success every 90 days or every 6 months, we need to have something in our arsenal to say, are we headed in the right direction? And that's a leading metric. And so I think profile views are one of the best leading metrics that you can look at, not because you just want a bunch of people to view your profile, but it's a starting point for you to understand, who are you reaching, who are you engaging with, and are they taking an interest in you? So are the efforts that you're doing potentially having some result with your ICP and the personas within them? And that's just a starting point for different kinds of leading metrics.
Absolutely. Well said. Am I sounding okay? Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Sorry, my mic sounded different. I'm actually going to go and start a new experiment as of January.
Okay.
I kind of started telling Morgan about this, but I'm actually going to take more of a sales approach because I want to create a really strong business case for these sales leaders that tell me that LinkedIn doesn't work. And so, for those that don't know, LinkedIn limits you to about 100 connection requests a week. I can tell you from experience, you end up in LinkedIn jail when you push that number too much. And sometimes it's hard to go and get out of there. But what I'm going to start tracking is, okay, so if I say my average is going to be 100 or less, how many of those connection requests are accepted? Of that acceptance, how many of those do I actually reach out and have a conversation with that decision maker? From that number, how often does it lead to a meeting? From that number will tell me then how often do I close and how long does it take? And then what is the average deal size? So I'm actually going to go and start tracking the efficiency of that sales process from start to finish to see, compared to phone, email, and everything else, what is the fastest sales cycle I can have, and which creates the best deal sizes and is predictable. And so I don't know because I haven't been tracking it that way, but that's what I'm going to start doing because the CRM only tells me so much. So if anybody wants to know, stay tuned. Please message me if you want the template once we're done. But
You should throw up Robert's question. This is a good one. So about leading metrics, does predictive mean anything to me? Does predictive mean anything when it says, may, it could, it might? Predictive should not be tied into uncertainty, as a follow-up comment that he had. So yeah, you're right. The problem is that of the number of companies we talk with, they don't have any historical data to base their predictions on. So if you're just getting started, all of the predictive quote unquote metrics or leading metrics are going to be related to uncertainty, related to, let's see how this works out. It may work. It could work this way. It might work this way. And then once you have a foundation for that data, once you have a historical set to say, over the last 90 days, we did these metrics and this is our effectiveness on each of those things, then you can be more certain. And at a taxonomy level, yes, sure, more predictive around how effective those campaigns could be or should be, right? And have a direct causal relationship between these activities and these kinds of results. But for most SDRs and most AEs that you and I have interacted with, Nick, there's no historical data to suggest any effectiveness at all. And so constructing a set of leading metrics to say these sorts of activities are related, hopefully, or predictive, hopefully, of our success 60 to 90 days down the road is a way for you to get started to say, here's what we think might work. And then 90 days later, you can say, this worked or didn't work.
yeah, and like, what if I'm talking to a sales leader, somebody that's telling me that they want to invest in LinkedIn, what I want to be able to do is tell them based on my business case when they can expect revenue back from LinkedIn. How does it work? And build that case for it so that people actually want to dive in. And, predictive just means that based on this many activities, this is what should happen. You can't give anything concrete because people are humans. We have feelings that, come before logic. And so for me to go and say a concrete answer, if you do this, 100% of the time, you'll get this 100% of the time, it's not realistic.
Mm-mm.
Yes, it'll be effective, but the right mix is what makes it effective. So what is more effective right now is the question. Is it cold calling? Is it cold emailing? Is it social selling, like LinkedIn direct outreach, YouTube comments,
Mm-hmm.
Slack communities? What is the Yeah, Robert, it has been a very long time since we connected. It's very nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. Many, many, many years since those days. But yeah, you have to really look at what's effective because Marcus Chan actually brought this up the other day that he used IPAs, which already had my attention because I love IPAs. But then he threw me a curveball and he meant income producing activities. And he said, as a sales professional, as a revenue generator, you need to break down those effective activities so that you can predict what type of revenue you'll be generating and
Mm-hmm.
focus your time and energy on the right activities that give you the right results.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really important for you to look at, okay, should I invest more into cold calls or less? Should I go and do more into emails or less? Should I go and do more marketing on LinkedIn to go for
Mm-hmm.
demand gen? Or should I do more direct outreach? What works better for me and the types of people that I'm targeting? But I
Mm-hmm.
can't go and dive into any of those without
Mm-hmm.
knowing that.
Do you want to throw up Andrea's question?
Ah, yes.
Do you think if you get the profile views to send a message or video, hey, saw you were browsing my profile with millions of people on LinkedIn, what took you to my profile? That's a fun prompt. In my experience, the thing that I use that seems to get a lot of connection requests is, hey, first name, hey, Andrea, thanks for stopping by my profile. Were you looking for anything in particular? It's an open-ended question. Sometimes people respond, sometimes people don't. But it usually gets a pretty good connection request acceptance rate. I think the benchmark I have is 75%, maybe somewhere around there,
Mm.
which is pretty high. But they were checking out your profile. And that's probably weighted a little bit towards second degree connections, I think, are more likely, for me at least, to connect than third degrees. But that's not always the case. They were checking out your profile. So,
Yeah, and just
um,
test it. Sometimes keeping it blank works,
mhm.
but it depends on, are they somebody you want in your community or are they somebody you want to target as a customer? And if it's something that you're delivering value on every day with your content and your comments, there's value in that connection. So try it, see what
Mhm.
works. I'm with Morgan. I see about that same amount, somewhere between that 70 and 80. And I play between, should I go and do blank or should I go and do personalized?
Totally. So yeah, I mean, I think what we've discussed so far is profile views are a good potential leading metric. What other sorts of things do you measure on a weekly level, Nick, that are part of your success on LinkedIn? What are the other things that you pay attention to?
The biggest thing that has been the ultimate game changer, and I'm going to call it that because it really has had that huge impact on what I'm doing, is just comments. How
Mhm.
many conversations, how many meaningful conversations am I having a day? The beautiful thing about commenting, it doesn't matter what platform. I've tried it on TikTok, I've tried it on YouTube, I've done it in Slack. When you comment, you are having a conversation, and how you phrase that comment will determine what level of information you'll get back. It could be something that's relationship building, or it could be something that's value driven. All those are open. And so when I started focusing on that, cold calling, you might only have a 1% connect rate. Well, 100 dials, one person.
Mhm.
Where with LinkedIn, I can go and have 5 or 10 conversations within the first hour of my day. And so I'm always investing into my prospecting by doing that. And if you use the LinkedIn sales nav trick that I talked about last week, that's a really powerful way to stay hyper focused on just commenting on the right people's stuff and making those social deposits and delivering on that social proof that makes you a highly valuable resource for those people, even if they don't buy from you.
Yeah, and I think what's so crucial to me about that is you're not limiting your conversations to just DMs or like DM follow ups or trying to get them on a call, which isn't a bad thing, right? Especially if you have trust or relationship with them and you've engaged with them for some time. And the ask for the call is just to chat more. And the instead extending a conversation inside the comments around adding value, what Nick has brought up previously, first key to insight or first to insight.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, yeah.
First
So,
insight.
or asking a question, about the content that they produced and just making it personal. I mean, if you're at a party and somebody starts talking about the history of the Great Wall in China, it's probably not a great time to jump in and say, "Hey, have you heard about my product?" Like, ask them about the Great Wall in China. It doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't have to be about business. It doesn't have to be about your product. It shouldn't be, actually. That's a
No.
shadow pitch, which we're not a fan of around here. Instead, it should just be a valuable way to extend the conversation in the comments. And that's, as Nick's brought up previously, doing that 5 to 10 times per day, 5 to 10 comments per day is a great way to get in front of the right people consistently and extending those conversations. Nick, you definitely taught me like have 5 meaningful conversations is a great metric to pay attention to, because now it's not just did I do my comments, but did they respond? Did it generate a conversation? Did they have a follow up inside my DMs? Because that dynamic exists where people don't want to, respond to your comment, and instead they want to respond to a DM with something more specific and something they don't want public, and that's great too. And just paying attention to those things in the back of your mind, like you're sort of creating. I have a short story. When I went to university, I got a degree in economics. And one of my favorite professors always talked about the point of the degree, unless if you went on and did graduate work, was not actually to be extremely technically competent at economics, because it's very math driven in the professional world. It's actually just to develop an intuition for the economy. And a lot of stuff in an economics degree is very counterintuitive. And so you're trying to teach yourself this new way to think and the sort of impressions that you're trying to get. And you're trying to develop this intuition in a way, which is really just guesswork. And that's fine if your guesses are off, but you're just trying to get closer through experience and developing that intuition. And similarly, with what you've brought up, that's is very resonant. It's a very similar take, which is we're just developing an intuition. Is this effective? Is it not effective? Are we getting the results that we're seeking? And all of that's really straightforward in my view. We know if what we're doing out there is getting attention or not. We know whether we're frustrated in a week because we put out 10 comments and we got no responses. And you're like, what? Why? And that's a great feedback loop, a personal feedback loop, to start developing that intuition more and more, and to have some critical personal feedback about why didn't this work, and do a little analysis every 30 days. What kind of progress have I made? And that's where like numbers are important. We talked about profile views, the number of comments, and maybe meetings booked, and then pipeline KPIs, etc. Those are all important, but it's also that intuition of, did I have a good meaningful conversation with someone? Do they trust me now? And if you don't have that sense yet, it's something that you develop by having meaningful conversations with people and see if you can develop trust with it. It's not a catch-22. It's just something that you have to learn through experience as earned wisdom, which means in all cases that you're going to mess up, because earned wisdom is earned. It's not given to you. So yeah, I have many earned wisdom experiences. So yeah, that intuition to me is also a real crucial part of understanding whether what you're doing is effective.
I want to throw up Kinder's comment because it's very on point with what we're discussing
Oh,
right
yes.
now. What should we be doing to leverage the connection acceptance? So, what you should be doing is using the algorithm to your advantage. So, what happens in your social selling index? If you haven't looked at this, just Google social selling index, it'll give you a number. The algorithm likes to show you people that you like to engage with. The reason why you go and say thank you or ask them how they've been, or you start a little bit of conversation after they connect, is because now you go, just because they're a connection doesn't mean they'll actually pull up in your feed. Once they start responding to you in a message, now you become top of feed, top of mind. And so what this allows you to do is, instead of trying to go and send a message right away and try to go and get them in a meeting, because what's in it for them, really?
Yeah.
Why would they want to do that? I actually go and slow it down, and I'll do it over 14 or 21 days, where I'll be building that relationship by messaging them. But by doing that, they're actually pulling up more in their feed. And I'll notice at about somewhere between 3 to 7 days, they will start commenting more and they'll start liking more. And then it always translates to a conversation about the content that goes into the direct messages. And normally what happens is, if they get it, it's a great conversation. If they don't get it, it's a great opportunity to have a meeting. because then you can clarify, because then it's a value add. And I will
Mhm.
tell you one thing that I've noticed in the past 3 months is that if somebody needs your help, they will tell you within 72 hours of connecting, because it's hot. It's on their mind. They're trying to make a buying decision or something is really pressing. They, once you say thank you or reach out, they will message you. So when you're doing this game of numbers of 100 or so every week, and say you get 50 people, you're adding to that. That's what happens, is you have a compounding effect per week. And then you're playing to social psychology, because people are then seeing that they're commenting on your stuff as well. And so it actually plays up. And so it's really understanding how the algorithm works in your favor. And then, of course, tracking those numbers to see what works. It's
Mhm.
typical marketing, right? A/B
Mhm.
testing.
Mhm.
Uh,
Can
and
you
we,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry. Finish your thought, Nick. I didn't mean
no,
cut
just
you off.
typical A/B testing. No
Mhm.
connection, personalized invite, none. Accelerated process where you try to go for the meeting right away. Slower process. Which works better?
Mhm.
I'm telling you guys what works better for me in the past 3 months, which actually led to meetings, which actually led to sales.
Mhm.
If you have a different approach, I would love to hear about it. Send me a message, because I would love to get people to hear different ways of doing things, because there isn't ever a perfect way.
You're right. And can you throw up Sarah's comment about this? Because I think this is great. This is from my feed. He says to Andrea, "Why not? You got nothing to lose by trying something different." Bing, 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 bing,
Well
bing.
said. Well
Well
said,
said.
Sarah.
Honestly, I'm a huge fan of experimentation. One thing that we've done over these last 90 days, and we've built a bunch of stuff around this so far, is do blank connection requests work to second degree connections, and at what percentage rate, and why, right? And trying to find what pieces of content are effective, or what personalized messages or what comments or what cadence are effective in driving that connection acceptance rate. And ultimately, I believe there is industry differentiation in this. I
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm enmeshed in marketers and salespeople, and I think we have our own way of connecting with people. But if you have a different ICP and different personas within that client persona, within the account, whether you're targeting sales managers versus C-suite, the way to leverage that connection request, or the way to engage with them, may differ from what we're talking about today. And it
Mm-hmm.
may require some experimentation and some innovation and a little riff from what we've discussed previously. And that's great, right? And while that can seem taxing, the benefit is, once you figure it out, once you run a couple
Boom.
little experiments, oh, you can just nail it home. And you can repeat it, and then you can tell others on your team, this is what I'm doing on LinkedIn and getting results. And honestly, like, I think early on, Nick and I were somewhere between like 20 to 40% connection acceptance rates to different people in what I was going after on my ICP.
Yeah,
And
definitely
then
less than 30.
yeah, I think I was probably like 25% most weeks. And
I don't
then
know if I
we did a little
was.
innovation and changed up the headline on my profile. And suddenly connection acceptance rates spiked to like
Mm-hmm.
60% in any given week. And I was like, what? That's crazy. And then we modified the profile, and then it jumped to like 70%. And then we started this comment strategy that we're talking about, where we comment on people's posts first and then generate a conversation and then eventually send a connection request. And then suddenly that's jumped it up for Nick up to 90%.
95%. It's almost
Right.
100.
Which is crazy. But depending upon your ICP, that cadence may differ. I think we're onto something. I think what we're talking about is fairly effective because of the social psychology that drives these tactics. But experiment, try something new, see what works, see what doesn't work. Try it, try it for a week. If you're sending up to 100 connection requests per week, that's a pretty good pool to experiment with, to see what
Mm-hmm.
works and what doesn't work. And ultimately, I always used to be, I'm like, God, I really wanted to connect with that person. Like, I wish I did the right thing with them. Nah, who cares, right?
Yeah.
There's
Now you're doing
however
volume.
many hundreds of millions of people on LinkedIn. If they're one person, don't worry too much about it.
Yeah. It's typical sales. Once you start focusing too much on one person, it gets away from you.
Hmm. Do you want to put up Jason's question? Because this is something I hear a lot. Jason asks, I find it hard to find posts that are worth commenting on at all. What types of posts do you look for to comment on? Nick? What types of posts do you look for to comment on?
There's one thing if you guys use the Sales Navigator trick that I taught you guys last week, this will come up a lot. And what you'll
Mm-hmm.
find is a lot of people blankly reshare or just share promotional advertising garbage that isn't worth commenting on unless you're actually looking to buy. And even then, it may not give you the information you need. So, what you want to look for is what are those blind spots in your industry or those conversations or the terms that people are looking for that you can jump in. LinkedIn Sales Nav also has a feature where you can go and search by keywords, and you can actually do saved searches with different frequencies, daily, weekly, monthly, and you can go back in there and it'll show you those relevant conversations. The key is trying to find those words, those phrases, though that information that goes and triggers a response from you. And so it takes time. I one of my favorite ones is cold calling is dead. I search that every week and I jump in. Another one I look for is social selling because I'm just curious what people are saying, and it gives me insight into how they view social selling. What does it agree with my definition? Does
Mm-hmm.
my definition need to change a little bit? Or is it something that I can start a conversation and see if I can sway them? Because sometimes that's fun.
Do you filter that by the leads that you've previously saved inside Sales Nav? Okay, you're just looking at the big
Open.
universe of LinkedIn. Yeah.
So, what happens when you get really niche and you really build out those really tight segments with your account lists and then your lead lists? Certain buying personas don't use LinkedIn the same way. I can tell
Mm-hmm.
you that engineers and IT a lot of the time prefer when you're just straight and to the point. Or they like when you're commenting on a influencer that they trust that they're commenting on because now you found engaging personalities that they want to engage. They may not post content, but now you can piggyback on somebody that's got a huge audience that they trust to engage with. So sometimes it's not looking at it so narrow and it's looking at, okay, if I have option 1, 2, and 3, let's do all of them. Don't just do one of them. And that was the biggest thing that changed the game for LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
as I was only ever focusing on one. And so it really limited my options. It also really limited my accessibility to the right people. And as soon as I started layering these options and then time blocking it into my calendar, it made it really fast and efficient. It also opened up more doors to better comments. And so what happens too is when you comment, it goes into your feed.
Mm-hmm.
It also goes into their feed if they like it. So this has a compounding effect. And this is where your numbers come in because normally what happens is it's somewhere between I don't know, usually just 2 to 3 comments. People will usually connect with me, or if after about three is my number. If it's meaningful conversations that we're diving in, I'll connect with them, and my acceptance rate is almost 100. And
Mm-hmm.
then what you can do is then you can work through that process and get them into a meeting because that sounds like a great way for you to deliver unexpected value. And something else you might want to look for, Jason, is there's something called the power base, and it's all about influencers and decision makers. But who has the ability to say no, but maybe not yes? Who's influencing that decision, whispering them in their ear the key pieces of information that they need to know? So there's the buying committee that is making the formal decision, but there's also an informal committee that is making that decision. Figuring that out and mapping out the politics has been a game changer. And social media, especially LinkedIn, allows you to go through that decision making tree, pull up the org chart, and find that. Once you start playing this game, this is how you get into the really fun big deals because now you're getting the right people viewing your content and you're nurturing in a way that is meaningful and in a way that they are opting in instead of
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to guess what information they want and putting it in their inbox. So it changes that game around and it can be really effective and it moves it really fast. So
Yeah.
just
One,
test it out.
yeah, one thing that speaks to me about that is like people on LinkedIn are passively engaging content. Right? It's native content. 99% of people just don't create content, and 95% of people don't engage. And so comments are content creation. The algorithm shows people commenting. We all have seen it. Morgan Smith found this insightful, so you see my reactions. Morgan Smith commented on this, you see my comments. So that's a different form of content creation that leverages the algorithm that gets them in front of people. And so if you're sort of have the multi prongs that Nick has talked about, where you're either commenting on the influencers that they follow, you're leveraging connections to get in front of them specifically, and then you're keeping up that engagement without ever DMing them. A good chunk of people will see at least something that you're putting out in any given week inside the nebulous of the algorithm that people are just natively scrolling. They're like, oh, that's interesting. And they see it again. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And it's the next point. They see it a third time and they're like, huh, who's this guy? And then they go check out your profile.
And
And
then
then
once
either
you see
what we talked
that,
about previously, you could connect with them, or they may connect with you, and then you get to strike up a conversation. And it's just, again, finding where inside the algorithm this really works. And it does depend on your ICP. It does depend on the personas that you're going after. And knowing that more off LinkedIn or on LinkedIn, understanding how they use the platform is going to really accelerate how you leverage the platform to get in front of the right people. And that's true for all sales professionals trying to do this for cold prospecting, and all of us freelancers or entrepreneurs who are leveraging this for deals. I mean, it's some of the foundational stuff. So we've talked about profile views and meaningful conversations and comments. We talked about pipelines and KPIs as lagging metrics. What other things do you pay attention to, Nick, when you try and think about how effective you are on LinkedIn?
one thing I really track is what types of questions or comments are coming back to me. And so I used to go and get, and then this comes with time, guys. You know, first thing is just to get people engaging. Now you get people engaging. Sweet. You've done something right. Pat yourself on the back. That's a big win.
Mm-hmm.
Who's commenting and what types of conversations are coming from it? And that is when it gets really fun, because I'll notice where they are in the sales cycle or where they are in their knowledge base. And this has taught me a lot about how to frame things, because I have made statements and then they said something clarifying back. And I'm like, they did not understand what I was saying. That's not their fault. That's my fault, because I didn't frame it in a way they understood. And so I kept testing and testing and testing. And then you start getting those conversations. And what got really interesting, and this is part of what I want to go and put into an article for you guys for in the new year, is the different types of posts led to different conversations in my direct messages versus in my comments. And that got really interesting, is who and why, what was going through their head when they responded with that. And because I was doing it at such a volume, this started to happen more and more. And I started to pull insights of, okay, what type of person responded to that? What was that word? What was that phrase? That, what did Marco Aaron call it? That copy, when it's so good, is when it's invisible. You're basically saying what's going on in their head. And what I started to realize is the reason why most social media, most sales, most marketing fails is because the customer knowledge isn't deep enough, or they're trying to target too many people at once, so they're not having the same conversations enough to see these trends and these patterns of conversation that give you insight into how people think and make decisions. This is why when I say build out your lead list based on personas, so that you can have that same conversation 50, 100, 1,000 times to go and see this, because then now you're getting in their head. And when you're posting content, you're saying the words they are saying in their head, which they may be too afraid to say out loud. And the funny thing is, those are the ones that have been ending up in my DMs and creating a really great conversation. Got a couple comments here I think we could go and dive into. What do you think?
Yeah, Olivia has a great question.
Okay, let's do it.
Olivia asks, how can I correctly move forward to inviting on the meeting? It's a great question. It's something that we've talked about a lot, actually. Nick, do you want to give a first stab on this?
So this is part of what I've been testing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, unless I can offer them value, Olivia, something that when I go and say, like, my point of view or some piece of insight or information that is so good, so critical, that once they know, they can never not know, and it changes the way they look at the world. Seth Godin's amazing at this, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
He sneaks up on you and didn't even realize he was teaching you something, because he's using some metaphor that's so out in the blue. But if you can't say that, pump the brakes, slow it down, put your cadence to 14 to 21 days before you ever bring up your business, and focus on getting to know them as a person so you can figure out those psychographics later that you can use to target people better. And
Mm.
so what I
Hmm.
do, Olivia, is if I have something that's really key piece of information that I could jump into right away, or there's some type of trigger, like they just got a promotion, or I noticed that they were talking something about sales that was I didn't agree with, I would go and get a meeting right away. I was like, I think that I could bring value. I could give you some key pieces of information or tactics that you could try right away that would have a huge impact. And we could also clarify some of the questions that you have about this. And I'm at about 50-50 on that.
Hmm.
When I book a meeting after 2 to 3 weeks of producing content and doing that relationship driven approach, I'm at over 80%. And so what my recommendation is, do both. Don't just pick one, do both. And then that way you're guaranteed to fill your calendar with those key meetings that'll drive things forward. And the worst case scenario from booking a meeting is you'll learn something,
Hmm.
and that
Yeah,
guides your
no,
content.
and you can also language it as a way to get to know them more if that's the right play for the people that you want to go after, which is like, do you want to hop on a call to discuss this further based on the conversation? Or I think it's best if we hopped on a call to discuss this further. When next week would work with for you on Tuesday? Ask very specific questions so that you can get a response. And if they're not interested in a call, chances are they'll tell you, right? And that sucks, obviously, if somebody's like, no, I don't want to have a meeting with you. But nah, it's just some guy. And it's like, nah, that's his own story. You don't have to worry about that. The point is, investing on the front end allows you to make that more personalized approach and a more trust focused approach so that they know it's not just somebody who's there to sell them. Like, you genuinely want to have a conversation and get to know them more
I want
or
to
know their
dive into
issues more.
Faraz's post, and then we'll go to James.
Oh, yes. Throw up Fraz's comment. This is great. So Fraz comments, when I don't find any post to comment on, I go to the profiles of influencers that I follow, find a good post, and comment. Whew. That's dead on, man. That's awesome. That's exactly what Nick was talking about previously.
Make sure that their audience is your buyer or your influencers, people that you want to talk to. And that's when this gets highly strategic. And then if you can, Faraz, you can't do it on everyone because it just doesn't work. But what I do is I go look through the comments and I find something that I can comment on the people in the comments. And that's a really great way to book a meeting right away. And I've had sales from that. And so if I could go and challenge you to level up and just kind of one up yourself, is look for comments in those as you're commenting and start a dialogue. Ready for James's comment?
Totally. Let's throw
Let's
it
do it.
up. James asks, how often should you post on LinkedIn? Once a day? Once a week? What's an ideal mix between comments, connections, and posts?
This is a great question.
This is a
Great
great
question,
question.
James.
Do you mind if I just jump in? Do you want me to
Do
just
it.
dive into this? Okay.
Yeah.
So my rule of thumb is up to 20 connections per day, including people who are visiting your profile. So if you have a lead list based on an account list that you're running cold prospecting on and you're trying to comment and connect with them, that's included in that mix of those target profiles that you're trying to connect with and those that you're sending connection requests to off of your profile. And that's basically just to keep you out of LinkedIn jail, right? So if you're doing 20 a day, 5 days a week, that's like 100 per week. That's about the max that LinkedIn wants you to do. If you exceed it, in my experience, like by 5, it's just not great. So it's just not to best not to avoid that. Comments, as we said previously, 5 to 10 comments per day are great in all the myriad ways that we talked about. I like to focus more than 50% of my comments on either the bucket of target accounts that I'd like to sell to, or the influencer accounts that Nick was talking about, and either comments on comments or comments on the posts themselves. And then if I have peers, fellow marketers, fellow salespeople, whoever, and I see something great that I would like to comment on with a valuable comment or a question or a little humor, I'll do that as well. But I try to have at least half of those comments or more of the focused on the target accounts and the influencer accounts. And then in terms of content, it's really up to you. Nick and I generally post daily, but that's also because we're running a little different content strategy than a lot of people, because we have this live show and we can repurpose stuff from this. So if you don't have stuff to repurpose, it's just not a big deal to try and keep yourself to like one a day. This is not shameless promotion because it's our own show, but we just released I couldn't resist. We just released a podcast episode with a senior enterprise SDR, David Burkham, and he talks about his content creation process. And he tries and posts once a week, a couple times a week. It's not a big deal to him, right? Because even though content, like what you're actually posting, can influence the lagging metrics we talked about previously. It can influence pipeline. It can influence revenue. I would encourage you not to think about yourself as a content marketer and not to hold yourself to the standards of being a content marketer in which you're trying to measure the effectiveness and cadence of every single post you're putting out there. Is it important in the long run? Maybe, but the leverage that you have from just those first two things, the comments and the connections and the conversations, that's so much more valuable in my experience than trying to hold yourself and spending all the time and attention to try and post once a day if you have to write every single post. You can. If that's your cup of tea, go for it. I've done it. I did it for months. I know Nick's done it. We do it still. But if you're trying to struggle with content creation, don't worry about it. You're not a content marketer. Focus your attention and energy on the comments and the connections and the conversations. And content can naturally come out of that. One idea that I love, maybe Nick has brought up before, and other people have as well on the podcast show, is that you can take insights from those conversations that you have and repurpose them into content that you share on your network. And so now you don't even have to dream up something off of a question or dream up something off of a topic. You're just taking the insights you had from a call. You anonymize it, of course, right? I had this excellent call with a senior SDR at a tech company. Here's what they said. Here's what the conversation was, right? Or here's the insights that I learned in that conversation. What do you think? Add 3 hashtags and post it. That's at least where I'd start. Nick, do you have anything to add?
It's less important about how often you post. It's more important how consistent you are posting. Start with once a week.
Mm-hmm.
And as you build more insights, move up to 2, move up to 3. Nobody is holding you, a gun to your head saying you must post 5 times a week or else you will not be relevant in LinkedIn world. It's one of the biggest insights that I've pulled. But one of the other most interesting insights that I've pulled in the last little bit too is there's way more value in posting with the mental note of how am I going to create a conversation versus how am I going to educate someone. And it's a little bit slower because now you're going to educate, one-on-one. But what it allows me to do is take that information, look for trends in those comments and the conversations I'm starting, and then I make a post about it.
It's great. Right? I mean, but like what better way to leverage everything else that you're doing into content? And also my rule of thumb, once you get good at this, once you get comfortable with writing a comment, adding value, asking a question, having a conversation, creating a post, sending connection requests, all that can be done in 30 minutes in a day. And in fact, to anyone watching, Nick and I have put together this document called LinkedIn in 30 minutes. And if you want it, send us a DM. We'd be happy to share with you all the stuff that we've talked about today and more, and all the little nitty gritty stuff that we've discovered so far as we continue to test and build our own insights on LinkedIn.
And please, as you're reaching out, let us know what types of guides you want next.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking there might have to be a market research, customer research guide coming out next because it's hard to do. It's a very hard thing to do, and most people don't have the process to do it. And so I know that I struggle with it. So if I'm struggling with it and the people I'm talking to are struggling with it, I know Morgan can write it.
Yeah.
So we're good.
Yeah, totally. Do you want to put up Kinder's comment next? Because this is great. This is a question about automation.
Yes.
So Kinder asks, what about services like Octopus, DuckSoup, Scab, LeadFuse, etc.? So these are all automation tools for LinkedIn. Nick, what do you think about automation for LinkedIn?
Use at your own risk.
Yeah.
I would just say count the days until you have no more LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of friends that dove into automation and was doing it well, triggered LinkedIn that they were using a third-party app, and LinkedIn is cracking down on this hard. The only one that I've noticed that they're okay with is Shield for
Mm-hmm.
analytics. But anything that's automating connection requests, redacting, or not redacting, like what is it called when you withdraw a connection request, automated messaging, any of that, you're gonna get frozen or you're gonna get permanently banned.
Mm-hmm.
And actually permanently banned. They will blacklist you and you're never allowed to go back. And anytime you try to go into a similar name, they pull your IP and they do different ways of making sure you can never do that. So
Yep.
I just don't. And honestly,
Same.
there's not enough volume for it to be worthwhile. This isn't
Mm-hmm.
emails. We're not having a 2% success rate. Think of yourself like a sniper. You're not holding a machine gun firing at anything that comes close by. You're
Mm-hmm.
looking and you're like, huh, is that what I want? Is that somebody I can go and help? Is that somebody I can go and engage with and provide value? No,
Mm-hmm.
don't shoot. And so when you take that approach and you slow it down and just have it as one of your channels, 20 a day is a lot. You could just do 5 or 10. Nobody says you have to do 20. That's the cap. But yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
personally wouldn't, because I know way too many people. I'm talking more than 30 that have been frozen
Mm-hmm.
or permanently banned just from using tools like that.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Feroz has a great question. Question is, do you ignore any connection requests that you get? If yes, what are your criteria? But if no, what's the point of personalized connection notes? So
That's a
I'm
good
not the
one.
right person to really answer this question. um, but that's also because I'm a unique user of LinkedIn and I have my own point of leveraging the network. And I basically accept almost any connection request that I get. If the personalized note is a pitch about their service or a product or something, then I immediately decline and ignore. But I think that's just like good manners on LinkedIn anymore, because we all have enough things to deal with in our day. We do not need another pitch in our inbox. And so I definitely ignore those sorts of connection requests. So then what's the point of personalized connection notes? Great question. It's a conversation starter. So if they accept and you personalized a connection note beyond just, hey, we share the industry, we'd love to connect, or I'm expanding my network in this industry, and you went a step further and you did a deeply personalized connection note, which can be really effective, which is, hey, I saw your company recently raised 50 million in a Series B, and you have some question out of that, or you'd love to stay connected, or you say, hey, I just listened to you on this Inno podcast, thought you were great, had a follow-up question, and you ask the question. That's a conversation starter. So
Mm-hmm.
personalized connection notes are not just about getting them to say yes. It's also about opening up the opportunity that you get to have a conversation with them. And that
Mm-hmm.
conversation hopefully leads to more conversations, and maybe off LinkedIn and maybe into pipeline. And so personalizing isn't just a way to get through the noise, which it is, but it's also a way to take the step further and incite a conversation with them. And that works for me really well. So if somebody sends me a connection request that's blank, it's like, yeah, sure, I'll connect with you, whatever. But I'm not going to follow up with them unless if they ask me a question after that. But if they ask a specific question in their personalized connection note, of course I'm going to start the conversation. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll answer that. And I think a lot of people are like that. And that's why, for me, the connection request to profile views of were you looking for anything in particular is a great start and has worked really well for me, because 50 to 60% of the time, people who accept that, they respond. They say, no, I wasn't looking for anything in particular. Loved your content. Just wanted to be connected. I was like, great. That's all I wanted to know. You're building that intuition, that map of data about how things work. Yeah. Anyways, Nick, do you ignore any connection requests that you get?
Yep. all the time. I get really sick of the same sales pitches. And I
Mhm.
don't even mean sales pitch. I mean that people read a guide and they give you this generic, hey, I was looking to connect with financial advisors in Calgary. Cool, I'm not one. So
Yeah.
goodbye. And so the danger is a lot of those are automated and garbage. And so it tells me that they're lazy and not worth my time.
Mhm.
Another thing I'll do is I'll go and look at their profile and see what if they're actually active on LinkedIn. If they are they promotional or are they value driven? I'm I have enough connections. I don't need more promotion. And yes, I could go and connect with them and unfollow them, but there's no value in it for anyone. And so I decline stuff all the time. I love personalized invitations because a lot of people will start a conversation. But I'll go back to my old cold call training that I used to give people. There's three things that people want to know when you call them, and it is very relevant for LinkedIn connection requests. Who are you? What do you want? And why do I care?
Mhm.
The last one that most people miss is why do I care? And so you got to go and be strategic on what was something that'd be worth their time, or else they'll just decline you because you didn't do the research or you weren't relevant enough. But one thing I've noticed that works really well is if you're going to hit somebody with a pitch, or you're going to hit somebody with something like direct, it has to be extremely time sensitive and not your time, or like can't be the salesperson's time, it's their time. And that is extreme insight. You have to really know something, that regulation is changing, or there's something that's coming up before their funding round before they can do it that'll change the way that they're evaluated, or they're evaluated. You have to go and look at these insights, or else there's no point. There's no
Mhm.
sense of urgency. So what are you rushing for? Just to go and hit vanity numbers? So I actually noticed that I will accept with more people with blank requests than crappy half-assed requests. But you have to make sure your profile looks professional and looks presentable, because
Mhm.
it is your LinkedIn landing page. And if you sell yourself short on the one thing that you can own as that, that's your story that you're telling, that is your framing how people can see you. If you just leave that up to everyone else to figure out for you,
Mhm.
maybe I'm a control freak. That's not acceptable for me.
Totally understand though. I think you're dead on, and most importantly, it's just the care and attention that you're giving somebody in this whole process. Like that's the point of it. And when you look at direct response copywriting, which is relevant when you write cold emails or you do cold calls or you do ads or you do cold outreach, the point of direct response copywriting is to create a sense of urgency. So you have to understand what problem you're solving. And the main mistake that I see in this approach, which actually does directly relate to our topic today in driving sales, is they center the feature of the product that you're trying to sell. So they correctly identify the problem. They don't have enough time, they don't know their money, they don't know their whatever problem people are experiencing. Your product solves. But then they make the mistake of saying our product solves that problem for you. Would you like to get on a call? That's not going to get because then people are like, "Oh, I'm just going to get pitched. Oh, it's just a demo call." They don't have any interest in that. Everybody's busy enough. They don't, even though the problem's been identified, they're like, "Nah, there's lots of products out there." Instead, you can center the benefits of using your product, not the product itself, not the features of the products, but the benefits to the end user, which is now you have time, now you have money, now you, now you can be correctly evaluated. Is that
Impact.
worth a call? Is that worth exploring to you? That's a great question, because then somebody can say, you know what? Yeah, that actually is worth exploring. Let's jump on a call. Or they'll say no. And then now you know it's not worth exploring. But if you center the benefits of working with you or your company instead of the features, the things that they'll experience, now it gets to a deep psychological principle in marketing and in sales that people want their problems to be solved. And if they're willing to pay for it, they'll pay for it. And they don't care about how it really gets done. They just want that problem to be solved. Anyways,
Kinder's comment quick, and then we're
sure.
at time.
Sounds good.
I think Kinder, you might actually have to give me a little bit more information on this.
Mhm.
What about non sales but non industry related? So are we talking sending a connection request to somebody that's
I think so.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
What's the value in the connection? It's what I ask myself every time. Why would they want to be connected with me? Why would I want to be connected with them? Honestly, I can't even tell you how many people I've connected with because they had super witty taglines or super witty taglines or like summaries. And I'm like,
Mhm,
that was brilliant. Like, that was
mhm,
so good. And I'm like, what, how did you come across this? Or like, I just want to know. And so that's how I go about it. When random people send you a connection request, I look at their profile and I see where the value is. Why would they want
mhm,
to be connected with me? I'll be honest though, if I have to try too hard, then I just decline.
mhm.
If there is
Same.
no quick response and all of their when I go to their activity and scroll, if their profile is not filled out, they have very little connections. They look at their activity and they have either none or it's all reshares of just the company's post or it's just about buy my product. There's no value in it. They didn't understand the assignment, so
Mhm.
they shouldn't be on LinkedIn in the first place.
The TikTok trend audio. I understood the assignment. I did. So, to sort of wrap this up, I think quick summary. There's leading metrics you can pay attention to: profile views, engagement. Although I don't really pay attention to engagement. You can comments that you're providing, acceptance requests. Can be leading or lagging, depending upon how you think about your leading strategy. And then there's the lagging metrics. How to know that LinkedIn is effective in driving sales? It's driving sales. It's driving pipeline and it's driving sales. And everything you're doing is just hopefully contributing to that. And so you'll, through trial and error, through earned wisdom, through experimentation, by being willing to send a connection request and for it to flop, and by willing to change up a personalization to see how well it will do. Oof, English is hard this morning. You're building an intuition for what works and what doesn't work for your target audience. And that is not something you can purchase. It is something that you have to learn through trial and error. And we certainly have. We speak like that from experience because we definitely tried stuff that hasn't worked or worked at a really low rate. And, hey, lesson learned. We're laughing because it's so true. We've hopped on calls before and we're like, oh, that didn't work at all. Any final thoughts, Nick?
If you're worried about trying or you have tried and it's just not working for you, just message one of us
Hmm.
and we'll make sure either you get the guide or we'll give you some guidance to get you started. But
Hmm.
you're not alone. We're here to help you. And give yourself a pat on the back for doing this. This is an investment in you and your process, not the company that you're with. It's you. It's good on you. And
Hmm.
if I don't see or hear from you guys before Christmas, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I wish you all the best.
Bye.